Okay, everybody, this is Sheets, and I'm going to be going through my breakdown of the MMA DFS slate for tonight, tomorrow, however you want to look at it. Again, I don't want to get DraftKings all mad, but so I'm not going to show the actual DraftKings lineup builder, but we're going to use the MMA odds, bestfightodds.com, along with my grid to highlight the way I think that I'm going to go about this card. And it's a straightforward type of card with respect to process. You're just going to have to get, I mean, I guess lucky with the right underdogs. That's just kind of the way this is going to have to go. Because there's some fights that I'm Xing out and some fights that I'm prioritizing, and I don't know. I think I have kind of a handle on what we're going to do here. So the first thing we have to do is again try to highlight those fights that rate to finish within the distance or have a good under 2 round prop or something like that. So looking real quickly, I mean, this one, uh, not so much. What you're looking for is the very worst, an over 2.5 round prop of about, minus 100. If it rates to go more than 2.5 rounds, it's really not a fight that you want to target unless you have a fighter who, with the new DraftKings scoring system, really rates to get a lot of takedowns because the new scoring system just rewards that and rewards top control nowadays. So if you have a good grappler that can get a lot of takedowns and just smother the guy for 3 rounds, that could overcome the lack of a good inside the distance prop, if that makes any sense. The fighters who are just going to pick a guy apart sort of for 3 rounds don't really score all that well. So if you want to take strikers, you probably want to take the guys that really are looking to knock the guy out in the first round. Otherwise, you prefer to have like a wrestler. That's just kind of the way things have gone since they revamped the DraftKings scoring system. So this Silva buys fight does not really fit that description too well. So it's not a fight you're going to keep. Montel Jackson, Jesse Strader fight is just kind of a mismatch on paper to the point where they actually have an over under 1.5 rounds of about even money. So they're really telling you that Montel Jackson is going to win this fight either in the first or second round. Now with DraftKings, they have, um, and I'll go back and forth between that. I mean, they have Montel Jackson as a full 9,400. I think he might be the highest salaried guy on the slate. So, he's going to have to knock the guy out in 1 round really to make value. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If you do use Montel Jackson, you are just you have one path to him being in the optimal lineup, really, and that's him winning in the first round. I shouldn't say that. I mean, there are ways that he can get there otherwise, but it's going to be tough if he doesn't drop him in the first round. But the odds makers seem to think he has a decent enough chance to do that. So I'll definitely be using him. What I'm not going to, well, we'll get to the straighter side in a minute. The Giles Delizzi fight's another interesting one. It's not quite pick 'em for 1.5 rounds, but it's certainly around pick 'em for over under 2.5 rounds. So it is an interesting fight from that perspective, and also it's interesting with respect to it rates to be a close fight, as the salaries kind of indicate. You have an $8,208,000 guy. Um, so this seems instinctively like a fight that I want to key. Now, I do have kind of a lean on this fight. So if I am going to play, say 10 lineups and I'm going to run, all 10 of them have at least somebody in this fight, I am probably going to go 60% Giles compared to Delizzi. So that's just what I'm going to do. It's not that big of a lean, but it's, I just figured I would be transparent, let you know what I was probably going to do. So probably going to play at least close to 100% of this fight. It's because, again, it's got a good inside of distance prop and, rates to be close. So it also, you can fit other guys in your lineup pretty nicely if you do that. So I'm probably going to go 60% Giles, 40% Delizzi. Dawson Santos from the inside the distance prop is not really that great of a fight. Now Dawson might have put on one of those performances where he, just puts up wrestling on Santos. So it's possible that Dawson can get there. And he also is trained by that same guy I highlighted last week. Now with Kraus, now unfortunately that recommendation didn't turn out so well because he got knocked out in the first 5 seconds. The guy recommended last week was trained by this guy, so who knows? But Dawson, he's probably a pretty safe play there to win, but I don't know if he has the ability to score enough points to be in the optimal. But I'll certainly use him. I also feel as though Santos rates to be a live underdog, just because, again, people are going to just look for guys to play. And I'm probably not going to do it. I mean, again, I have a little bit too much faith in this trainer that, especially last week, where his guy got knocked out in 30 seconds, I think he's going to do a better job of making sure that doesn't happen today. Where Santos might be considered a live underdog by many, I'm probably not going to go there. And it's a little dangerous because there aren't that many good underdogs on the slate. So that's my take on that fight. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have any interest in either of the female fights today. Actually, did they both go out? I know one of them got dismissed. No, just one of them, I think. So I'm not going to have any interest in this Chase on Renault fight. And let's just double check. Yeah, it's got a terrible inside the distance prop. It doesn't project very well. I'm just not interested. So Tuivasa versus Hunsucker. This is a kind of rescheduled fight. I forgot who dropped out. I think Tuivasa's other opponent dropped out, so Hunsucker stepped in, or vice versa. But in any case, Tuivasa is an enormous favorite, and it rates to finish inside the first round. As a matter of fact, with these odds, I mean, you have to lay 2-1 on under 1.5. So they're really pricing this thing to end in the first round, which means that someone's scoring 115 fantasy points. Now, again, 4-1 odds, it's just really likely that he gets that Tuivasa wins, and it's really logical that he does so in the first round. So it seems to me that I'd want to get an enormous amount of Tuivasa. Now, the thing is that I want to look at ownership here for a minute. So for those of you that are thinking, well, why don't I just go play the other side too, since we're race to finish in the first round? Yes, if Hunsucker does win, it would be by it would be by probably by KO also. Actually, I don't have ownership on that fight right now, but you're gonna need, like, you think about this, you really want to have the opponent here, Hunsucker, to come with 1/4 of the ownership, right, of Tuivasa, right? Since Tuivasa is about a 4-1 favorite, he should be owned about 80% of the time, 80-20, and that's presuming, again, that that the people own this fight 100%, which they won't. So I have this feeling that Tuivasa is going to be underowned in that respect, because I really do think that people should have 100% of this fight. I mean, look at that inside the distance prop, but he's not going to be 80%. He's probably going to be about 50 or 60. So if that's the case, then you're going to only need Hunsucker to be about 15% owned or less, right, to have good value over Tuivasa. That makes sense. Tuivasa 50% owned. Yeah, you need Hunsucker to be less than 15% owned, maybe about 10% owned. Is he gonna be less than 10? I don't know, maybe. So I think you're actually getting a break-even proposition on Hunsucker if you try him as an underdog. I actually don't think that that's such a terrible idea, because, again, it's just an equity play. I mean, if he wins, it's going to be by he catches him somehow in the first round or so, or even the second round. And if that does happen, it opens up your salary board. Number one, it gives you a lot of fantasy points, and it opens up your salary board to get a lot of these other good guys in, which is so I think I am going to probably grab a little bit of this. Now again, I'm probably going to have a full 100% of the fight, so it's not as if I'm going to need him to win, but I think you'll get good enough leverage on other things to justify taking a shot. Now, the question is always how many lineups do you need to play before you take him? I don't know. I think you could do it if you play one. You know what I mean? Like if you play one, I mean, look, you have to take risks somewhere, right? So why not do it on something like this? Again, it's not going to work all that often, but when it does, you're going to be in good shape. And when you build some lineups, you're going to see why. Because you're going to need some good long shots to make a lot of other things work here, I think. So next fight, Max Griffin against Song Kanan. Once again, the problem here, well, there's a couple of problems with this fight. Well, number one is that it's got a really bad inside the distance prop. And number two is that if you wanted to take Kanan as an underdog, again, the same thing. He's kind of like a striker. And you're really betting on him KOing Max Griffin. And Max Griffin, he has a really, really good chin. He grinds it out. He's going to probably try to do a, takedown-ish type fight. And so, if anything, I think that you might speculate on maybe Max Griffin getting one of those, wrestling type performances. I don't think that the edge is that strong here for that to happen. So I'm probably going to end up fading this fight. But I could see a justification for doing anything here, but I'm probably going to end up fading it. So next one, Adrian Yanez against Gustavo Lopez. So what this is to me, this is your classic MMA hype parade, right? So what they do is they'll bring in a really hot prospect to face kind of an older guy. Not saying it's a fixed fight, but it's a fight that I wouldn't say older or whatever. He's older for sure. It's not like 80 years old or anything like that. And you'll see the inside the distance prop is very strong. It's you got to lay $157 for under 2.5. It's almost, well, not almost a pick 'em, but it's close to a pick 'em for under 1.5 rounds as well. So the reason for that, I presume, is for Yanez. But I don't know, man. He's going to be. Let's revisit his DraftKings price here, and his DraftKings price. By the way, Griffin was 8,500. Yanez is all the way up to 8,800, and in a card which I have other. I'd much rather have, say, Tuivasa, for example. It's a lot to pay here. Now, again, Vegas is telling you that it does have a good chance to finish this on the first 2 rounds. So maybe it's worth it. So what I would do is I'd probably put, some exposure on Yanez. And then I'd have to think about whether I want to use Santos as one of my underdogs. Maybe. Again, I prefer to have an underdog that's got some knockout upside also. But obviously you can't have everything. So maybe I'll play a little bit of Santos as some of my underdog exposure. Okay. This other fight, female fight, I'm not going to play this one. Again, just because the inside the distance prop is so weak, it projects to be a weak fight. So I'm not going to play it. One of the reasons why I want to somehow save salary some places is because I would like to get this Gillespie guy in most of my lineups. It's got an okay inside the distance prop. All right, you see the over 2.5. It's about pick 'em, but the guy's style, Gillespie, is just perfectly suited for DraftKings scoring. He gets a lot of takedowns. Riddell could get taken down a lot, and then he can get up and get taken back down again, and it just comes all over again. So he could be one of those guys that I discussed earlier where, you even though he might not finish, he might rack up just an insane amount of points across a 3-round decision. So he's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, um, play on the slate, I suppose. It just fits the bill there. The, now with that said, I think Riddell, I mean, could be a punt. Again, he is also a guy who maybe he gets a knockout if Gillespie screws up or something like that. But, I think I would rather, if I had to punt, I don't know, who's a better punt, Riddell or the Hudsucker? They're both pretty lousy, but I think that, I don't know, maybe they're about equal as far as shitty punts. I might do a little of both. So I actually, if I'm going to be fair, I think I should say that I'm probably going to have 100% of this fight. But a thing is, I'm going to have like 90% of like Gillespie, and only like maybe one lineup or so with Riddell in it. And the Riddell thing, the thing about the Riddell is that, it's similar to Tuivasa, is that if you do get that done, not only do you open up a shitload of salary, but you get a lot of leverage because I'm sure a lot of other people are playing Gillespie also. I should say Gillespie's not exactly the highest owned guy on the slate. So according to my numbers, Yanez rates to have higher ownership, as does, well, Montel Jackson. It certainly makes a lot of sense. And the Holland fight, where Holland specifically rates to have higher ownership. So maybe Gillespie is not the worst play in the world, and maybe the leverage isn't as strong because remember, so Tuivasa is about going to be about 45% owned compared to Gillespie's 35%. So I feel as though that the leverage against Tuivasa with that punt is a little bit better than the leverage with Riddell. Now, I neglected to mention the Montel Jackson's opponent, that being Schrader, and no, I am not going to be playing him because the thing is that the reason for the for the 1.5 prop is not because Schrader has a chance of knocking out Montel Jackson. It was solely for the Montel Jackson side, whereas the other one, it was partially because both Tuivasa and the opponent also, they both just have a lot of finishes. So yeah. So as I was saying, Gillespie, good amount of him, really, really strong play. And then in the main event, Brunson Holland, here's the problem. The problem is that as I just mentioned, I'm really struggling to get some decent punts. There are a couple of guys that we kind of looked at, and there are a couple of ways you can go. But before we get back to them, this is why Brunson is just going to be a great play. It's a 5-round fight, and you have that floor, which is a really, really big deal. Not to mention the fact there's also a really good inside the distance prop if you want to try to, think this is going to finish early. I mean, it's about a pickup for 2.5 rounds, and if it doesn't work out, you got the 5 rounds of point scoring. So this fight is definitely a key fight that you're going to want to play. And just because of the way lineup construction is going to work, unless you're willing to play, I think 3 underdogs, I believe that Brunson is going to have to be one of the 2 underdogs you play. I think. I'll let you guys, kind of fiddle around with it. So let me go back to the 2 fights, or actually, we're going to talk about the Santos fight, but let me review that Bruno Silva fight that I kind of looked over really, really quickly. It had a really bad inside the distance prop, but you have to figure out what you want to do with respect to underdogs, because you're not going to be able to play. You're not going to be able to play all favorites almost ever. And you do want to get in a couple of these 9,400s, like the Montel Jackson's like really good play. Gillespie's a really good play. So what are you going to do? I mean, you have to pick probably at least either one big underdog or two small ones. So who do we talked about? We talked about Santos. I mean, that's a rough one, man. That's a rough underdog to take, but I guess it's okay. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. That's why they're underdogs. And then the other guy we talked about a little bit was Bruno Silva. So Bruno Silva, even though, again, we didn't talk too much about the fight because I didn't like the other side at all, Bruno Silva is certainly a live underdog. Now, he's probably not going to finish. So it's not going to be a high-scoring underdog, but those are two different kinds of constructions. Number one is you play two, you know, probably low-scoring, decision-earning possible underdogs like Santos and Silva, for example, or you could put Song in that mix also. Like you want to play Song Kanan because he's probably not going to score all that well. Um, I mean, he probably could be. He might get it. Actually, he might get a KO. So maybe so he could be one of the two mid-price underdogs you throw like either Conan or Silva or Santos, or you could just punt with those 6,800 guys I mentioned. Whatever his name was, the Hunsucker guy, or try to fade again and play Riddell. So those are two different constructions that you can use. Now, again, if you want to play Hollins, you'll see when you build lineups what I'm talking about. But I have nothing against Holland in this fight. I think they're both kind of perfectly priced, and they're going to have just incredible amount of upside because of the 5 rounds. I want to have 100% of the fight. I think I'm going to find it difficult to build the Holland lineups though. But if I can get them, then hey, I'm in. I'll play 50% of him or whatever it is. But I just have this weird feeling I'm going to be, once I build all these things, it's going to end up throwing me a lot of Brunson. We'll see. Overall, I think it's a very reasonable card, and that's about all I got. Good luck, everybody.